Hello everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. In today's video, we'll be looking at Ron DeSantis' viability as a nationwide candidate and his recent decision in Florida to sign a 6-week abortion ban. Let's just get right into it here. I think it's important to talk about this, politically speaking, obviously, and how it's going to impact DeSantis' likely imminent 2024 run. So we have to understand a few things. First of all, banning abortion restricting it in this way is not popular. Obviously, there are a lot of states that do lean, towards the anti-choice side, as you'll see here. But the majority of states, particularly swing states, are pro-choice, broadly speaking. And this is one of the most extreme bans in the country. The majority of states do still have abortion legal in most cases, and then other states have bans that are similar to this, but give more time for the pregnant mother. But in this case, this is a very, very harsh ban. It's getting a lot of media attention for pretty obvious reasons, and so I think you can also see a lot about the attitude that Republicans have with abortion through what DeSantis did here. So you can see in this article, he quietly signed it, and that's actually true. He signed it, I think, at 10:45 in the night on Thursday, and it was behind closed doors. There weren't a lot of people in attendance. Usually, when you sign, a big piece of legislation like this as a governor, you'll have, people with you clapping and supporting you. He only had a few people there, and it was, it was not very hyped up, I guess, because again, this is an impactful piece of legislation, whether good or bad, and it's just kind of odd to not have that much of a scene when you're signing a landmark bill like this. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that he hasn't made this a centerpiece of his campaign. Republicans have in the past talked a lot about abortion, and what we saw was that in 2022, that cost them. They lost a lot of really close statewide races, specifically gubernatorial races, in which they fared very poorly because voters just thought they were too extreme on abortion. And a ban like this, 6 weeks, that's on the more extreme end of abortion restrictions across the country. So to me, I think this is going to be pretty impactful for 2024. For long-time viewers of the channel know that I used to actually be a big Ron DeSantis electability fan, in that I thought he was going to win. I thought he was going to win decisively. And, he still has that potential in him. He does. But to me, he's lost momentum. I think he's had, just, he doesn't have the, I don't want to say savviness anymore, but he lacks the energy that or the hype he was getting in the summer of 2021. Because if you remember, summer 2021 was kind of an awkward time politically because Biden wasn't popular, but we hadn't, been exposed to the full red wave narrative at that point, and COVID was still a thing. Like I remember I was wearing a mask at least in the beginning of the summer, and that's around the time that I got vaccinated. But there was a lot of there were a lot of questions about the Biden administration. By the way, the Biden administration, in retrospect, a lot of people think that they did go too far on their COVID mandates. So DeSantis, that was his thing. COVID kind of switched in 2022 over to wokeness, critical race theory, kind of making that a centerpiece of his campaign. But again, between that and abortion, those are both social issues that just don't really resonate with the country as a whole. Florida's a red state, obviously, and it, reelected him by a landslide margin. But Florida's not the country as a whole. What works in Florida will not necessarily work, nationwide, especially in a general election. So let's talk with this map. I think DeSantis has 219 electoral votes pretty safely locked up. Obviously, in a best case scenario, he might lose Texas, or in a best case scenario for Biden, Biden would win Texas maybe. But I don't think it's worth talking about it in this context. And the same could be said for DeSantis with Michigan or New Hampshire. But broadly speaking, this is the map. There are 6 competitive states, and the other 44 are going to vote for one candidate. We know this. So let's talk about the status of abortion in these 6 states that are competitive. All of these states, with the exception of Georgia and Nevada, actually, have Democratic governors. The other 2 states, or the other 4 states, actually, that have Democratic governors, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and North Carolina, are all states where abortion is, not restricted too much. In North Carolina, the future of abortion is uncertain, but broadly speaking, it's not restricted. Also notice that, broadly, all of these states were pretty good for Democrats in the midterms. I think the best example of this is probably, Arizona and Pennsylvania, where Democrats flipped the governorship in Arizona, held on to it by a landslide margin in Pennsylvania. Then in Arizona, they held on to the Senate seat by a good amount, and they flipped Pennsylvania. Georgia was, I would say, broadly good for Democrats. They lost the governorship by, a decent amount, but that race was not as contested as the Senate race, which Democrats won. And Nevada was interesting because Democrats, I think, did better than expected, but not very much was expected of them walking into the election. And I think the long-term trends there are not good for them. But I guess you could say it was a win because they did hold on to the Senate seat that, quite frankly, they were not expected to hold on to by many people. And so, yeah, I mean, all of these states had some sort of backlash to the Dobbs decision, some bigger than others. Like North Carolina, I think, is kind of a bad example because there was no Senate race there or governor's race. We didn't have like a big high-profile statewide race to dissect. But Democrats did actually win a congressional district in the state that they were expected to lose by a pretty good amount. Obviously, the 13th district, Wiley Nickel beat Bo Hines, and that was a race that I had actually written off as a pretty strong Republican-leaning seat. And so Democrats overperformed essentially everywhere nationwide, but in in these states specifically, it was especially pronounced. And these are states that DeSantis would need to win, 4 of the 6, because again, he trails Biden in terms of like safer electoral votes, so he need to win 4 of the 6. And the easiest path for him, I think, would be through North Carolina, Wisconsin, then Nevada, and then one of Georgia or Pennsylvania. Arizona is interesting, but it doesn't get him to 270, so I don't really know. Georgia technically doesn't, but if he's winning Georgia, he's probably winning Pennsylvania too. So I think they kind of go hand in hand. But either way, let's go back to this map. So let's talk about DeSantis's electorate back home in Florida. So he won by, I think, 18 points, which was very impressive. But he did it, there were a few asterisks. So first of all, DeSantis, the electorate that he won with was not representative of the electorate as a whole. The most recent general election we had in Florida was a Trump +3 electorate, meaning that Trump won Florida by 3. And, whether it's DeSantis or Trump in 2024, they're probably going to win it by a bit more. But it will not match the 18-point win that DeSantis got in November. And he was aided because Democratic turnout was atrocious. Democrats did not turn out in Florida. They, had no amount of early vote, kind of firewall built up the way they did in other states. And overall, we saw DeSantis, overperform, but the electorate that he won was likely closer to a 10-point Trump electorate than a 3-point Trump electorate, which was what the, more accurate electorate would have been. And even with, a more Republican-leaning electorate, Floridians were still pretty pro-choice. We saw 56% of Floridians tell CNN exit polls that they believed abortion should be legal. And we saw, again, 56%, or a quarter said legal in all cases, a third said legal in most cases, so adds up to 56%. And then, this 40% said illegal or in most or all cases. So Florida broadly is a pro-choice state. It's conservative. It will be Republican for a while, but it is a pro-choice state. And so DeSantis, as you can see here, he actually won a third of people who thought abortion should be legal. And that's why he won statewide. Like, obviously, Charlie Crist did very poorly with, anti-choice voters, but DeSantis did really well with pro-choice voters. And that's why he was able to win, not only, but, win the governorship, but win by so much. And so he needs to continue that nationwide. And signing a 6-week abortion ban is the exact opposite of how he can continue that. So all these states, I think with the exception of North Carolina and maybe Georgia, but definitely these other 4 states, Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, they're all more pro-choice than Florida. Biden's leading in the polls in most of these states, and I think you could say he's outright favored, especially in Pennsylvania and Arizona, which gets him to 270. So DeSantis would have to win, these 4 states plus one of these, and that is looking harder if he keeps going down this, more right-wing abortion, rabbit hole. Banning abortion or restricting it's not popular nationwide. We saw that in 2022, and it gets worse for Republicans because 2022 they had better turnout than Democrats, and it could have been a lot worse had Democrats actually turned out at an equal rate. In a general election where Democrats have higher turnout, especially with voters of color, it's going to be really hard for Republicans. So this is a step in the wrong direction to me for DeSantis. I think it really hurts his electability nationwide. He has time to recover for sure, and I think he still has a lot of potential, but this point in time, I think he's really shooting himself in the foot with this decision. I think it makes him a less appealing candidate to the broader electorate. So thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you all tomorrow.